Hello listeners, this video discusses The Picture of Dorian Gray written by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was an Irish poet and playwright born in the year 1854 and died in the year 1900. He is one of the popular writers during the 1880s and 1990s in London. He is popular for his epigraphs and plays. He supports aestheticism. Aestheticism is a European arts movement followed in 19th century, which centered on the doctrine art exists for the sake of its beauty alone, and art does not want to serve political, didactic, or other purposes. Even in his work The Picture of the Dorian Gray, he has incorporated the themes of decadence, duplicity, and beauty. Throughout his lifetime, he was into two movements, that is, aesthetic and decadent. Decadent was a movement in 19th century which focuses on artistic and literary movement, which followed an aesthetic ideology of excess and artificiality. Let us see his notable works: The Picture of Dorian Gray, The Importance of Being Earnest. The work Importance of Being Earnest is a play, is already discussed in this channel. If you want to listen to this video, please click on the link given on the description box. Let us see an overview of the novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. It is a philosophical novel written by Oscar Wilde, an Irish writer. This novel, before it came as a novel-length version, it was published in American periodical magazine called Lippincott's Monthly Magazine. The novel was issued as a shorter novella length version published in July 1890, and it became published as a full-length novel in the year 1891. The story of Dorian Gray revolves around a portrait of Dorian Gray, which is painted by Basil Hallward, who is a friend of Dorian. Hallward is an artist who's infatuated with Dorian's beauty. Dorian meets Lord Henry Wotton, who is a friend of Basil Hallward. Wotton, he has a thought that beauty and sensual fulfillment are the only things worthful to live a life. While he gets close with Wotton, Dorian Gray, he understands that his beauty will fade, and he expresses his desire to sell out his soul so that the picture would age and fade and he would remain the same way as young. The wish is granted for him, and he pursues a libertine life of varied immoral experiences while staying young and beautiful. By the way, his portrait ages and visually records every one of Dorian's sin. This novel is recognized as a classic piece under Gothic literature. It is criticized that this novel is taken from the real-life characters that Oscar Wilde has met. Hallward is supposed to be the painter Charles Halswood Shannon, and Lord Henry is partly inspired by Wilde's friend, Lord Ronald Gower. Wilde has also taken his inspiration to produce this work from the influence of poet John Gray. The novel has the preface, and it has 20 chapters. In the preface, Wilde talks about the subhuman character Caliban from Shakespeare's play The Tempest. The novel is adapted for film and stage performances. To mention a few, in the year 2003, Stuart Townsend, he played the role of Dorian Gray in the film League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. In 2009, the novel was adapted into a film named Dorian Gray. Actor Ben Barnes starred as Dorian, and Colin Firth starred as Lord Henry. Let us now see the characters of this novel. Dorian Gray, he represents the ideal youth, beauty and innocence. He has a friend, they are Basil and Lord Henry. and he's subject to the affection of Basil, who gets infatuated under Gray's beauty. Apart from it, Dorian Gray is a handsome and a narcissist young man, meaning he is a self centered personality. He indulges his life to enjoy every pleasure and virtually gets along with sins, which later affects him. Next is Lord Henry Wotton. He's a cultured and an intellectual person. He's an aristocrat. He's a friend of Basil. He neglects Dorian's beauty. Next is Basil Hallward. He's a painter who becomes infatuated with Dorian Gray's beauty and innocence. His masterpiece is the picture of Dorian Gray's portrait. Sybil Vane, she is a talented actress and singer and a beautiful girl from a poor family. She falls in love with Dorian. Vane, after loving Dorian, she finds no pleasure in acting and also in fictional love as she experiences real love in her life. When she finds that Dorian no longer loves her, she commits suicide by poisoning her. James Vane, who is the younger brother of Sybil Vane, he's a sailor who leaves for Australia. He is a protective brother, whereas their mother cares only for Dorian's money. When James Vane finds that Dorian would harm Sybil, he hesitates to leave and he promises that he will have vengeance upon Dorian if any harms befalls Sybil. After Sybil's death, James, he is obsessed to kill Dorian and he stalks him. While performing this act of killing Dorian, James is killed by a hunter accidentally. The character of James Vane is compared to Laertes in Hamlet. Also, the character Sybil Vane is loved by Lord Henry, and this love affair is compared to Ophelia in Hamlet. Alan Campbell, who's a chemist and a friend of Dorian, later kills himself. Lord Fermor, who is Lord Henry's uncle, he gives information to Lord Henry Wotton about the family lineage of Dorian Gray. Adrain Singleton, who's a friend of Dorian when he was young. Adrain, he introduced opium to Dorian. Victoria Lady Henry Wotton, who is the wife of Lord Henry. Lord Henry ill-treats her and later they divorce. Let us see the summary of this novel. The story begins in the studio of Basil Hallward, who is a painter. He entertains his friend Lord Henry Wotton by painting. He does philosophical painting and he tells his friend Henry that he is relentlessly working on a portrait in depicting a beautiful youth named Dorian Gray, who had an extraordinary influence on him and is infatuated towards his beauty. All this is happening on a beautiful summer day in Victorian England. Basil Hallward introduces Dorian Gray to Lord Henry and they sit for a conversation. Dorian listens to Lord Henry's speech. He says that beauty is the only aspect of life worth pursuing. He also influences that Dorian's portrait would age instead of him. Lord Henry has a hedonism worldview. Hedonism claims that human behavior is determined by desire to increase pleasure and to decrease pain. Hearing hedonism influence from Lord Henry, Dorian, he wanted to explore his sensuality. He also falls in love with Sybil Vane, who is an actress who performs Shakespeare's play in a dignity way. Sybil Vane performs her drama in a working class theatre. Dorian frequently meets her and proposes marriage to Sybil Vane. Sybil calls him Prince Charming and she is happy with her lover, but she has a protective brother named James. He warns that if Prince Charming harms her, he would murder him. Once, Dorian invites Basil and Lord Henry to see Sybil's performance in Romeo and Juliet. That day, Sybil wanted to give her best in her performance. Unfortunately, she performed poorly, and this makes his friend Basil and Lord Henry to think that Dorian has fallen in love with Sybil because of her beauty instead of looking at her acting talent. Dorian, who's embarrassed, he rejects Sybil, telling her that acting was her beauty. Without that, she no longer can interest him. Meantime, Dorian has his portrait in his house. The portrait brings out a finest display of philosophical chatter for Dorian, and the picture seems to be a small young boy in an age of new ideas. His friend Basil also excitedly says that this portrait is the best thing that he has ever done. Even after Henry's warning that his beauty and youth will fade, Dorian has an extreme interest to the portrait. As he returns to home after observing the theatrical performance of his lover, Sybil Vane, he notices the portrait. He observes that the portrait has changed. He thinks that his wish has come true, and the man in the portrait bears a subtle sneer of cruelty. For a while, Dorian was conscience stricken and lonely, so he decides to reconcile with his lover Sybil. When he decides to talk to Sybil, he gets an information from Lord Henry saying that Sybil has killed herself. Dorian Gray understands that his life is heading to lust and beauty, and 18 years pass by as Dorian locks up himself with sins. He is also morally poisoned by a French novel introduced by Lord Henry. Throughout the years, Dorian opposes abstract ideas. One night, his friend Basil, before he leaves for Paris, he meets Dorian in his house and he asks about the rumors of his self-indulgent sensualism, meaning he hears about his friend that his friend is excessive into sex, alcohol, and drugs. When Dorian talks with his friend Basil, he admits that he is into adultery and takes too much of drug, alcohol, and also invites him to see the portrait. While looking at the portrait, Basil could not identify the hideous picture, but he can only identify it as his picture by the signature that he affixes to all his portraits. Looking at the picture, he is horrified and he beseeches Dorian to pray for salvation. Dorian, who's already in anger with Basil for changing his fate, he blames for his fate on Basil and he stabs him to death. Dorian then contacts his friend named Alan Campbell. He's a scientist and has a good knowledge of chemistry. Dorian blackmails Alan Campbell to destroy the body of Basil Hallward. Later, Alan kills himself in fear. In order to escape from the guilt of the crime that he has committed, Dorian goes to an opium den where he meets James Vane there. James Vane, who is a brother of Sybil Vane, who is already seeking vengeance upon Dorian for being the reason of Sybil's death. But James doesn't know that it is Dorian because Sybil Vane would only call him as Prince Charming. So instead of Dorian, he only knows the name Prince Charming. And in the opium den, he hears someone calling Dorian as Prince Charming. When he looks at Dorian, he could not believe that he is too young to have known Sybil because the incident of killing Sybil happened before 18 years. James could only observe his face as a young man, Dorian's face. However, James Vane approaches him in a motto to kill Dorian, and a woman comes in between them. When James Wayne, in a doubtful way, asks whether the man that they see is Dorian Gray, the lady affirms that the man is Dorian Gray and explains that he has not aged in 18 years. Then James runs after Dorian, but he has left. James began to stalk Dorian, which causes Dorian to fear for his life. Unfortunately, in a shooting party, a hunter kills James Wayne accidentally. Meanwhile, while returning to London, Dorian he tells Lord Henry that he is going to live a righteous life from now on. He also talks about Hetty Merton, with whom he is currently having romantic interest. While looking at the Dorian's portrait, Dorian himself wonders that if his newly found goodness has resented the corruption in the picture, but when he looks at it, he sees only an even uglier image of himself. Dorian understands the reality and has a curiosity for new experiences and also has a desire to restore beauty to the picture. He then decides that only full confession will absolve him of wrongdoing. He decides to destroy the picture because the picture reminds him of his crime and also serves as an evidence for all his crime. He then takes the same knife in which he once murdered Basil Hallward and stabs the picture. The servants of the house, they are awakened by a crying noise from the locked room, and on the street the passerby also heard the crying noise and they called the police. When the passerby and the police entered the locked room, the servants of the house find an unknown old man who is stabbed in his heart. The servants are also unable to identify the disfigured corpse as Dorian. They could only identify Dorian with the rings on his fingers, while the portrait besides him is beautiful again. Let us see the themes used in this novel by Oscar Wilde. The morality of beauty and youth. The trouble starts when Henry warns Dorian that his extraordinary beauty and youth will fade. In the initial part, Lord Henry gives him more advancements and information on the hedonistic theory, art and the imitation of life. The novel itself opens with a theory of the purpose of art. Influence is a theme used in this novel. In the initial time, Basil is influenced by the beauty of Dorian, who is infatuated on him. As he gets influenced by his beauty, he started to paint and draw his own portrait. So the influence of this painting portrait itself is a supernatural element. Hope this video helps. If you have query, please write it down. Thank you for listening.